Hey, everybody, I'm Marcy Marcusa, and this is Manitoba, a podcast that makes sense of your news in 20 minutes or less. But we have to talk today about tariffs and Trump. So what does all this mean? Specifically for Manitoba, this 25% tariff on all Canadian imports that the president-elect Donald Trump has said he's going to put on Canadian goods. Well, in Manitoba, by the numbers, it could mean quite a lot. Our province exported $15.5 billion worth of exports to the States last year. In case you're wondering, the biggest one was medications, $2.3 billion worth in 2023. And then you got to look at canola, electricity, frozen vegetables, oil and gas, and agricultural equipment. Today in the podcast, we'll make sense of it all, from the concerns to those who are saying, maybe it won't be as big of a deal as we all think. This is Manitoba. So we're going to start with the biggest concern, or one of the areas and industries that has some of the biggest concern, and that is Manitoba livestock farmers. They are anxiously awaiting to see what is going to happen. So what Donald Trump has said is that this is going to happen right away, January 20th, when he officially takes office. Cam Dahl is a general manager over at Pork Manitoba. He says for pork farmers, this news is especially unwelcome because every year, Manitoba farmers produce around 8 million pigs. 3 million of those are exported to the United States. So that's nearly half if you're doing the quick math. CBC's Bartley Kivas spoke with Dahl to get some more detail to find out how these proposed tariffs could impact business in our province.
Well, the U.S. is when you consider both pork and live animals, is by far our largest markets. Our two largest markets for pork are Japan and the United States. And then when you add in those 3 million plus pigs that go down into the U.S. live, it is by far our largest market. And so when you consider that we're exporting 90% of our product, and all of a sudden we hear something like a 25% tariff that would essentially take that market away. It's extremely concerning to say the least.
So 25% tariff would take the market away completely. It would effectively end exports.
That's my assessment is that U.S. retailers couldn't afford to put Canadian pork onto their shelves. And the same thing with U.S. farmers that couldn't afford to buy Canadian pigs to finish. It would essentially close that market.
Let's say this actually happens. Let's say this isn't a threat. Let's say 25% tariffs are announced. What does day one of the tariff regime look like for a Manitoba company that is reliant on this right. income stream?
Well, I think day one is now. Given how devastating this would be on Manitoba, and not just for hogs, I think I heard a clip from Premier Kinew indicating that this would cause a almost instant recession in Manitoba, and I 100% agree with him. I think the response to this needs to happen now, and we need to be working with the incoming administration, of course, but also with senators and representatives, and our partners in trade in state governments like Iowa and Minnesota and others that rely on this integrated North American market, and we need to be showing why this integrated Canada-U.S. trade is in the strategic interest of both countries. It's in the strategic interest of Canada, but it's also in the strategic interest of the United States. And we need to be able to demonstrate how our integrated Canada and U.S. market in food and agriculture is helping mitigate food inflation. And so to show how that restricting the border and reducing trade is actually going to reduce the returns for farmers and increase the price for consumers, again, on both sides of the border. And this needs to be, this outreach needs to happen from industry, from the provincial government, from the federal government. We really do need a strategic initiative between now and January 21st to demonstrate why this is not in the strategic interest of either country. The pork sector in this province employs 22,000 people in every city and town. Whether it's bacon in Winnipeg or the plants in Brandon and Neepawa and Winkler and people on farm. It's 22,000 Manitobans and $2.3 billion to our GDP annually. It's a big deal. And how do you mitigate that impact of losing our largest market?
Cam Dahl,
Barley, I don't know the answer to that.
Cam Dahl is in conversation with Bartley Kivas there, GM at Pork Manitoba. He mentioned there that a coordinated effort's needed, strategy is needed. He also mentioned Premier Wab Kinew, who did say if the tariffs come into effect, it could send our province into a recession. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, meantime, is meeting virtually with the premiers today to discuss a preemptive response. And just to touch on that for a couple of minutes, Laura Stevenson's here to talk to us, professor and chair of political science at Western University. So what does the Prime Minister and the Premiers, what will they cover in this meeting?
Oh, I think it's going to be quite a lot. I mean, I think as you just heard from your previous guest, I mean, no one's going to be thinking that this is not concerning. There are going to be quite a lot of impact should such a tariff come into play, and it will hit each province a little bit differently, but it's not going to have no effect. And so it's very, very serious. And I think the Prime Minister obviously is well aware of this. And beyond that, I think the Prime Minister has also the benefit, I guess, of experience, right? Because they've done this in the past. They have mobilized for a trade negotiation with Trump in the past, and they're familiar with some of the ways that he does business. So I think what you're going to see is that all these premiers coming together, and you're going to have varying degrees of not panic, but, deep concern, I guess, and urgency. And then you're going to have a prime minister who says, okay, here's what we've been thinking of doing, because I know we've heard lots of reports that they've already been planning. Here's how it worked last time. Here's what we would like to do. And I think there's going to be some back and forth, different views, different ways of approaching things. And I think in the end, though, they will come out with some kind of a statement to try and quell a bit of fears right now, because there's a lot of panic when we think about what might this mean. I think in the end, this is not going to come to fruition, just given kind of Trump's style and what we've seen in the past. But at the same time, right, it is something that we have to be really seriously taking into account.
It's not the past, though. I think that's the thing that everyone's trying to grapple with right now, right? So you can look at what happened, when he was previously president. However, he has more power now. He also has 4 years under his belt understanding things in terms of a little bit of the differences between, negotiating for business versus negotiating politically. But his style hasn't changed. So when you look at sort of how this is going to progress, how might it compare to the past in terms of, what is different here?
Sure. And I think that's actually a really, really great point, because I do think that Trump has been emboldened significantly this time around. And I do believe that he is behaving somewhat differently, maybe a little more dramatically or with greater shows of strength. But what hasn't changed is the way that Canadians and Americans are integrated. And so while the leader of the country might change, I think the situation on the ground with respect to industry across the borders, especially the northern states, right, I think that remains the same. And so the integration of our two countries hasn't changed. And so even if Trump's feeling, more emboldened and stronger this time around, the fact of the matter is that Americans would also be hurt and affected by such changes. And that, I think, is the point that we have to be kind of focusing on right now.
So that's Laura Stevenson's take on the situation. Stevenson's a professor, by the way, of political science over at Western University. Well, it's really hard to say what we're going to do here next, because the one thing that nobody knows about the president-elect, as I alluded to in that conversation with Laura, is what his mindset's going to be. Because, yes, he's going to run the United States, but he doesn't like to run things as a traditional politician. He likes to come at things from a business point of view. So how much of this is bluster and how much of this can you really prepare for? Will the level of tariffs be 25%, Or will he be using this as a negotiating tactic, as we've been discussing? Not all businesses in Manitoba have the same level of concern as the pork producers, for example, that we heard from earlier. But of course, it just depends on what you export to the States. So before we talk to someone who doesn't do a great deal of export to the States, but he has a very definitive point of view on what Manitoba has to do to stay strong, we should hear from our premier here in Manitoba. Wab Kinew spoke out, and he had this to say about these proposed tariffs.
The potential impact of a 25% tariff, all sorts of stats we could share. The bottom line is it would mean a recession for our province. And we can't have that happen, especially as we're starting to make progress on healthcare and education and making a lot of good investments. We want to keep that momentum going.
Winnipegger Brian Sharfstein is director and co-owner of shoe retail company Canadian Footwear. While he understands why the news is concerning, of course, for so many, he has mixed feelings about it, and he joins us to talk about this morning. Hi there.
Good morning.
Why don't we start with what the Premier said there, Brian? He said these tariffs could cause a recession. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we've seen this before. I mean, recessions are nothing new. And given the way our government, our provincial government is moving, it will have an impact. But certainly we haven't been here before to some degree. It will depend on how the business acumens are of our provincial government in handling this. I'm waiting to see.
How much confidence do you have around that, the business acumen, as you put it, of the provincial government to handle this?
I'm right in the middle of it. How much confidence? I haven't seen a lot of business acumen. We see a lot of changes going on. Certainly being involved at the civic and provincial level, I stay on top of most things. And there are changes going on, but we're not seeing anything major that would encourage me to say that it won't have an impact on us. I think that things are moving slowly.
What do you need as a business owner from your leaders, as you mentioned, both the civic and the provincial level, to give you that confidence? What would you need to be seeing in terms of having confidence that they could plan for this or that they could weather this?
Well, we don't appear to be a make it happen kind of province. And city from a business perspective. Small and medium-sized business struggles here. And we're certainly a third-generation business, and we've seen recessions before. And having said that, you need a government that's going to listen to what the concerns are, removing some of the red tape. They certainly are looking at taxing and making it more challenging on different fronts. But again, this isn't anything, Marcy, we haven't seen before. It's a matter of how we stick handle it, if that's the right term. We will survive.
The mixed feelings specifically about the tariffs, what could be positive about them?
Well, not that we see that much tourism coming up, but certainly I expect that we'll see more Americans coming up here to shop because of the difference of dollar. And certainly I think we'll be a little bit more competitive if that has an impact. From a local perspective, I think when we've seen recessions before, people buy smarter. They don't necessarily look for cheaper goods, but they think a little bit more about buying the right goods. So history has showed us that locally, and I would think it might be across the country as well, people are going to buy smarter. They're going to buy something that will last longer, not less disposable product. That's why I don't think it's going to hurt us. I think that we're going to see this thing through, and I'm concerned that a lot of people will overthink it. And also, I think a lot has to do with public perception. That really is an issue. We have all these other impacts with supply chain and strikes like postal. These are actively been going on. This is only one more thing, and I don't think this is going to sink the ship.
How much business do you do in the States, Brian?
It's negligible. We certainly have been looking at it. We do e-commerce business into the States, but nothing that is significant. We have focused in Canada the last few years, and that's where our growth is right here in Canada. We do bring some product in from the U.S. I don't see that changing, but certainly we will remain competitive or more competitive. We won't necessarily be able to ship some of those goods into the States. And so even given right now, if I can use the comparable with the postal strike, the cost of us shipping those goods to the States now have become prohibitive. So we're holding those orders, and our customers in the U.S. understand that because, again, we have to be competitive. So we're limited. We'll watch what happens there, but we're not concerned because that's not the biggest part of our business as a small business.
You said that you are concerned about public perception, consumer perception around this. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that?
Well, I think that there's three sides to all stories, and I don't know that the average person who's reading the papers, who's listening to media, really understands the whole picture. I'm a big believer that if it doesn't affect you, and I think in terms of the city, if something doesn't happen in your part of town, it may not affect you, so you don't think about it. Well, I'm not sure how this will impact the consumer, our citizens, certainly here. And again, I look at our customer, and respectfully, our job is to educate them, to help them understand what people are buying. And so creating a perception, there's a reality and there's a perception. So we work very, very hard at educating our customers. And I think that if we can have the consumers, if we can have citizens better understand the overall picture, that word recession is scary. There's certain things that are going to throw fear and that perception is we're in trouble. And I don't think that we are. I think that people just have to see all sides of the story.
And just to try to get a bit more detail here, I know you said it's not a big part of your business, but you did mention you're holding orders that would go to the States. How many orders are you holding, or what percentage? I don't know what measurements you have for what size, what that means for your business.
Well less than 1 or maybe even 0.5%. It's negligible. I can go into my warehouse and look on one wall of what's going into the U.S. So it's not a lot. We do 99.9% of all of our business in Canada, so it really doesn't concern us.
Anything to add I haven't asked you about?
The only thing I would add is people need to be positive and encouraged that we're going to see our way through this. They shouldn't think they've got to stop buying. I think that they just have to ask more questions and educate themselves more with anything that they're going to buy right now, because we're seeing prices come in from everywhere. So educate yourself as a consumer and buy carefully.
Thank you for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Marcy.
Well, soon we're not going to have to be wondering what's going to go on with these tariffs because January is coming up fast. This is Manitoba for today's episode. Remember to follow and share and connect with us. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for being here.